I'm not coming back. I've met someone better and already moved your things to storage. My name is Leonard Kessler, 54 years old, and at precisely 11:42 p.m. on a quiet Thursday night, I found myself staring at the cold, unfeeling screen of my smartphone in the meticulously organized kitchen of our Des Moines condo. The glow from the screen cast a sterile light on my face, illuminating the stark reality of the two sentences that had just detonated 15 years of my life. My wife, Dana, was supposed to be on day 4 of what she'd casually referred to as a girls' trip to Palm Springs. The text, delivered with the casual brutality of a forgotten grocery list, came accompanied by a screenshot that spoke volumes more than her words ever could at a bank transfer. A staggering 118,000, meticulously moved from our joint savings account straight into her personal, highly inaccessible one. The sudden, unexpected silence in the kitchen felt deafening as I slowly, deliberately, set my phone down beside my half-finished coffee. The ceramic mug felt warm against my fingertips, a fleeting comfort in the rapidly chilling air of my world. 15 years of shared moments, promises whispered, and a life carefully constructed, reduced to a terse declaration and a digital financial transaction. It was a clinical, almost surgically precise ending, devoid of anger, tears, or even a raised voice. Just 2 sentences and an irrefutable screenshot. For months, the signs had been as clear as the bold print on a financial statement, yet I had chosen to interpret them as faint whispers, easily dismissed. Weekend getaways, initially innocent, had gradually stretched into full, unexplained weeks. New clothes, expensive and brightly colored, would appear in her wardrobe, only to vanish or remain unworn whenever I was around. Phone calls, hushed and secretive, would abruptly cease the moment I entered a room, replaced by a feigned preoccupation with social media or an urgent need to attend to some trivial household chore. I saw it all. Every subtle shift, every discordant note in the symphony of our lives, registered in my mind with an almost painful clarity. After all, I am a forensic accountant. My very profession hinges on noticing discrepancies, on uncovering hidden truths beneath layers of seemingly normal data. It's what I do for a living. It's the very fabric of my professional identity. But I said nothing. Perhaps that was my first, most egregious mistake, the silent acquiescence, the implicit permission for the unraveling to continue. Or perhaps, in a more fundamental sense, my first mistake was marrying someone who, from the very beginning, viewed my career as merely a tedious arrangement of spreadsheets and boring, meaningless numbers, utterly devoid of any true value or intellectual challenge. With a practiced, almost robotic movement, I opened my laptop. The familiar hum of the fan was a small, grounding presence. I navigated to one of my lesser-known email accounts, a digital sanctuary Dana was blissfully unaware existed. 3 notifications from my bank's robust security system immediately caught my eye. Someone had recently attempted to change passwords on several accounts that Dana had, ostensibly, never even seen. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched my lips. She was being thorough, methodically attempting to sever every possible tie, to erase every digital footprint. I had to, in a strange, detached way, respect that level of comprehensive planning. I picked up my phone again, my thumbs moving with a deliberate rhythm. 2 words, concise and loaded with quiet defiance, were all I allowed myself to type in response to her declarations. Good luck. A small act of rebellion, a silent acknowledgement that this was not a surrender, but a declaration of war. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I called my brother Jason. Remember that contingency plan we discussed 5 years ago? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady when he answered, the late hour of my call clearly surprising him. A moment of silence on the other end, then a cautious, "Are you sure, Leonard?" "Yes," I replied, the single word ringing with newfound certainty. She just made her move. It's time. I ended the call, the click of the phone echoing in the quiet kitchen. My gaze drifted, almost instinctively, to the wedding photo prominently displayed on the wall, a relic from a happier, more naive time. It was the only picture left in the entire condo that still depicted both of us together, smiling, ostensibly in love. The other frames, strategically placed throughout the living space, held only images of Dana, alone or with her friends, vibrant and unburdened. A wave of bitter clarity washed over me. I should have noticed that too. The gradual, subtle erasure of my presence from our shared visual narrative. I first met Dana Bowman at a rather uninspired alumni event for the University of Iowa. I was 38 then, recently divorced from a short, rather forgettable first marriage, and my entire focus, my singular obsession, was building my forensic accounting practice. My life was numbers, investigations, the meticulous unraveling of financial deceit. Dana, at 34, was a stark contrast, vibrant, radiating an almost incandescent energy, ambitious in a way that seemed both admirable and slightly intimidating. And, perhaps most significantly, she was completely, unequivocally uninterested in the intricate details of what I did for a living. "I don't need to understand the details," she would cheerfully interject, a dismissive wave of her hand accompanying the words. Whenever I, in a rare moment of enthusiasm, attempted to explain the complexities of a particularly challenging case, or the satisfaction of exposing a complex fraud, "As long as you make enough for us to live well, that's all that matters." Her emphasis was always on "live well," a phrase that, in her lexicon, always implied a life of increasing luxury and minimal practical responsibility. We married after a whirlwind year of dating. I helped her open her first yoga studio, pouring my hard-earned savings into the venture, funding the entire dream from the ground up, believing I was investing in our shared future. When she expressed a desire for a bigger house, one nestled in a more exclusive, manicured neighborhood, I readily agreed, signing the papers without a second thought. When her aspirations expanded to luxury cars, sleek and expensive, and exotic, extravagant vacations that spanned continents, I simply nodded, pulled out my checkbook, and signed the checks, my financial signature a testament to my unwavering commitment. I was, in essence, becoming the silent, ever-present financier of her increasingly lavish lifestyle, a role I embraced, believing it was an expression of my love. My father, a pragmatic man of simple truths and hard work, had warned me once years ago. We were in his backyard, diligently fixing a section of his old wooden deck, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and fresh-cut lumber. He paused, hammer suspended mid-air, his gaze thoughtful and direct. "Son," he said carefully, his voice low and devoid of judgment, "I've noticed your wife spends a lot of your money. A good deal of it, in fact." He paused, then continued, his eyes meeting mine with a quiet intensity. "Just make sure she values what you do to earn it. Make sure she understands the effort, the discipline, the sheer dedication it takes to accumulate that wealth." I brushed him off then, muttering something about how Dana was simply enjoying the fruits of our labor, how she deserved a life of comfort. But his words, like splinters of wood embedded deep beneath the skin, stuck with me, festering subtly over the years. They were a quiet, insistent hum in the back of my mind, a subtle warning that I consistently chose to ignore. 6 years into our marriage, driven by a growing, undefined unease, I began quietly restructuring my assets. It was nothing illegal, nothing underhanded, purely protective measures designed to create a safety net, a bulwark against an unspoken, creeping anxiety. I meticulously created 2 limited liability companies, distinct legal entities designed to hold certain investments separate from our joint accounts. I established intricate trusts, vehicles for long-term financial security, that offered an additional layer of protection. I ventured cautiously into the then nascent world of cryptocurrency, diversifying my portfolio beyond traditional investments. And, maintaining a discreet network, I continued to manage offshore accounts for a select group of international clients, a facet of my professional life that was entirely my own. Dana, in her blissful ignorance, knew only about our joint checking and savings accounts, the public face of our finances, believing them to be the entirety of our shared wealth. I watched with a detached, almost clinical observation, as she became increasingly enmeshed in the glittering, superficial world of fitness influencer circles. Her Instagram followers, a metric I barely understood, grew from a few hundred to thousands, then tens of thousands. She started taking trips, initially short, casual weekend getaways with her wellness community. These quickly escalated into full, weeks-long excursions to exotic locales, always meticulously documented with artfully filtered photos of perfect bodies, green smoothies, and sunrise yoga poses. "You wouldn't enjoy it, Leonard," she'd say, a dismissive flick of her perfectly manicured hand. "It's all yoga talk and juice cleanses. Not your scene." I nodded, feigning understanding while the chasm between us widened, silent and invisible. Last Christmas, a minor but deeply symbolic event occurred. She forgot my birthday. Entirely. The day passed without a single acknowledgement, a casual oversight that spoke volumes about her increasing detachment. When I gently mentioned it the next day, a flicker of something that resembled genuine regret crossed her face, quickly replaced by a practiced, charming smile. She promptly bought me an absurdly expensive watch, a luxury timepiece I neither needed nor wanted, and offered a perfunctory apology. "I've just been so incredibly busy with the studio expansion, darling. It's been absolutely mad." I accepted the watch, a hollow gesture on both our parts. But that night, as she slept soundly beside me, oblivious, I sat up, pulled out my laptop, and finalized the intricate paperwork on my long, dormant contingency plan. Every sign, every subtle clue, every ignored intuition had coalesced into an undeniable, irrefutable truth. The full picture, once blurry and indistinct, was now in sharp, devastating focus. I just hadn't wanted to see it until it was undeniable. The morning after her devastating text, a fragile echo of my old life, I woke up early, before the first hint of dawn, and mechanically made coffee, exactly as I had done for years. Habits, deeply ingrained and comforting, are remarkably hard to break, even when the world as you knew it has collapsed into a pile of shattered expectations. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the quiet kitchen, a small, familiar anchor in the storm of my emotions. I logged into my primary financial management system, a sophisticated, custom-built interface I had originally designed for my forensic accounting practice, but had meticulously adapted for my own personal financial oversight. With a few swift, decisive keystrokes, I activated the contingency protocol, the intricate network of actions that Jason and I had painstakingly designed years earlier, a grim anticipation of a day I hoped would never come. First, with the chilling precision of a surgeon, I froze all our joint bank accounts and credit cards. A digital wall erected, instantly severing her access. Then, leveraging my extensive network of contacts within the banking industry, I immediately triggered a fraud alert on that specific 110,000 transfer, expediting the process, ensuring it would be flagged and investigated with the highest priority. Simultaneously, I compiled and sent a meticulously organized packet of documentation, proving financial misconduct to my attorney, along with explicit instructions to file for divorce immediately. There would be no hesitation, no second chances, no protracted discussions. This was a clean, decisive break. Then, taking a deep, fortifying breath, I called my mother. Her voice, usually bright and cheerful, held a note of concern as she answered. "Dana's left me, Mom," I said simply, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She took the money and moved my things out, while she was supposedly on vacation." My mother was silent for a moment, the pause heavy with unspoken understanding. Finally, her voice soft but resolute, she said, "I'm sorry, Leonard, truly, but I can't say I'm surprised." A confirmation of her long-held suspicions, which, unlike my father's, she had rarely voiced directly. What are you going to do? What I've been preparing to do for years, I replied, the truth settling deeply within me. Protect what's mine. All of it. An hour later, my phone vibrated insistently on the countertop, Dana's name flashing accusingly across the screen. I watched it for a long moment, then calmly declined the call. 10 more calls followed in rapid succession, a crescendo of digital desperation. Then a text message, screaming with capital letters and a palpable sense of panic. Du hat te hell did you do? Ti ma mar du mi work. I didn't bother to respond. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove directly to the storage facility listed in her earlier text. The address felt like a physical blow, a stark reminder of her cold calculation. Using the code she'd sent, a final inadvertent courtesy, I accessed the unit. Inside, amidst a chaotic jumble of boxes, I found 2 containing some of my clothes and my laptop. But the rest of my belongings, the truly irreplaceable items, faded family photos that chronicled generations, cherished first edition books, poignant mementos from my late father were nowhere to be found. They had been deliberately, systematically discarded, rendered insignificant. That's when something hardened inside me, a core of steel replacing the lingering vestiges of hurt. This wasn't just about the money anymore, though the financial betrayal was significant. It was about the casual, almost contemptuous discarding of 15 years of my life, a history wiped clean without a second thought, without a shred of remorse. It was about someone believing they possessed the power to simply erase me from my own life, to dictate my past and future. The hurt transmuted into a cold, focused resolve. I stopped at a quiet coffee shop, the anonymous setting a welcome refuge from the storm brewing within me. I opened my laptop, its familiar way to comfort, using a suite of sophisticated financial databases and proprietary analytical tools, accessible only to licensed investigators in my field. I pulled up everything I could possibly find on Trey Harmon. He was the fitness influencer Dana had been so enthusiastically tagging in her Instagram photos for months. The someone better she'd so blithely referred to. What I found confirmed every one of my growing suspicions, painting a vivid picture of a man living a carefully constructed facade. Trey's gym business, Harmon Fitness, was leveraged to the hilt, a precarious house of cards built on debt. 3 business credit cards were maxed out, their limits long exceeded. He was operating under a commercial lease he clearly couldn't afford, bleeding money on rent alone. And most damningly, Dana had already signed on a car loan with him just 2 months prior, intertwining her financial fate, and by extension, mine, with his precarious empire. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting my unreadable expression. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a complete, ugly mosaic. I drove to a modest hotel, opting for anonymity over the familiar, tainted comfort of my condo. For the first time in years, perhaps even decades, I felt utterly, completely clear about what needed to be done. The initial wave of anger had dissipated, replaced by a laser-like focus. This wasn't about revenge, it was about restitution, about justice, about protecting what was rightfully mine and exposing the truth. Monday morning, I walked into my office at precisely 8:30 a.m., projecting an air of calm, almost detached professionalism, as if nothing in my carefully ordered world had shattered over the weekend. My assistant Valerie, a sharp, observant woman who had worked with me for over a decade, looked up from her desk, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Leonard," she began, her brow furrowed, "I thought you'd be taking some time off. Dana called here 3 times already this morning. She sounds quite upset." "Did she?" I responded, the words a statement, not a question, my voice betraying no emotion. Valerie nodded, her gaze searching mine. "She said there was a major misunderstanding with your accounts and needed to reach you urgently." She sounded rather distressed. To be honest, I simply nodded again. "If she calls again, Valerie," I instructed, my voice calm and firm, Please tell her to contact my attorney directly. All communication regarding personal matters is to be routed through them. Valerie, sensing the gravity in my tone, simply nodded and returned to her work. By noon, Dana's level of desperation had predictably escalated from frantic phone calls to a dramatic in-person appearance. The receptionist buzzed my office line, her voice tinged with a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Mr. Kessler, your wife is here. She's quite insistent on seeing you immediately. She's rather animated." I sighed a long, wary exhalation that felt like an entire week's worth of accumulated stress. There was no avoiding this. I rose from my desk and walked to the lobby, the muted chatter of the office fading behind me. Dana stood there, poised and theatrical, her designer sunglasses pushed back onto her perfectly coiffed hair, her expensive yoga clothes impeccably coordinated, a performance in every fiber of her being, a wide, dazzling smile, the very same smile she had employed for 15 years, whenever she wanted something. Whenever she was charming her way to a desired outcome, materialized on her face as soon as she saw me. "Leonard, darling," she exclaimed, her voice amplified just enough for the surrounding reception area to overhear. A calculated performance for an unseen audience. "There's been a huge misunderstanding with the bank. A colossal mistake! All our accounts are frozen!" "Can you believe it?" She gestured dramatically, playing the role of the bewildered victim. "Not a misunderstanding, Dana," I said quietly, stepping closer, ensuring my voice remained low, a stark contrast to her theatricality. "You transferred money without authorization. The bank flagged it as fraud. My fraud alert system, to be precise." Her carefully constructed smile faltered, a crack appearing in her facade. "It was our joint account, Leonard! I'm your wife!" "How could it be fraud? You're my soon-to-be ex-wife." I corrected, my voice flat, devoid of the familiar warmth she had long taken for granted. "Who emptied our joint savings account while simultaneously informing me you'd moved out and found someone new. That, Dana, is textbook financial misconduct. And it's also, legally speaking, theft." Her voice dropped, transforming into a low, venomous hiss, barely audible to anyone but me. "You cannot do this to me, Leonard! I've already put deposits down on a new place." "I've made commitments." To Trey Harmon. I countered, a flicker of cold amusement in my eyes. "Yes, Dana. I know all about those commitments. Every single one of them." Her face went bone white, the carefully applied makeup suddenly stark against her pallor. "You're investigating me," she whispered, her voice laced with incredulity and dawning fear. "No," I corrected calmly. "Just protecting myself from fraud. My money, my assets, my future. It's what I do. I'll fight this," she snapped, her composure completely unraveling. "I deserve half of everything. Half of what we built together." I looked at her evenly, my gaze unwavering. "Half of what's in those accounts, sure," I conceded, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk touching my lips. "But you seem to be under the mistaken impression that's all there is." She blinked, confused, her mind struggling to grasp the implication. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out in discovery, Dana," I said, my voice resonating with quiet authority. Then, without another word, I turned and walked back to the sanctuary of my office, leaving her standing stunned and bewildered in the middle of the lobby. That afternoon, an email landed in my inbox, forwarded from my attorney's office. It was from Dana's newly hired legal counsel, a predictably aggressive and poorly executed maneuver. The email contained a series of strident demands for immediate access to all my financial records, coupled with thinly veiled threats to expose irregularities in my accounting practice if I didn't comply. It was an amateur move, a bluster designed to intimidate, entirely lacking in any real substance or leverage. I forwarded it back to my attorney with a single, concise instruction: proceed as planned. Ignore the noise. By evening, Dana had, with predictable efficiency, rallied our mutual friends to her side. My phone began to buzz incessantly, filling with a cascade of indignant messages, a barrage of digital condemnation. Leonard, why are you being so vindictive and controlling? This isn't like you, Leonard. Why are you destroying her? Donna is devastated. You need to fix this. Not a single person, not one, had questioned where she had been the past week, or with whom. No one had bothered to ask about the substantial sum of money she had brazenly taken. I didn't bother responding. There was no point in engaging with their ill-informed outrage. Instead, I went to the gym. Not Dana's sleek, impersonal studio, nor Trey's flashy Instagram-ready fitness center. I went to the small, unpretentious community center gym, where I had been quietly going for years, a place of genuine effort and honest sweat. I lifted weights until my arms trembled with fatigue, until my muscles burned with a satisfying ache, the physical exertion a welcome counterpoint to the emotional turmoil. Then I drove back to my hotel room, the anonymous space providing a sense of detachment. The trap was meticulously closing, but not around me. 3 days later, my attorney called, her voice crisp and efficient. "Leonard, we've found something rather interesting," she began, a hint of professional satisfaction in her tone. "Dana's been siphoning money from your joint account for over a year now. Small transfers at first, almost imperceptible, then gradually escalating into much larger sums." "To where?" I asked, though a cold certainty had already solidified in my gut. "Multiple accounts," she confirmed. "Some to her personal savings, but the vast majority, nearly 80,000 total, to a business LLC registered to Trey Harmon. And she used your joint funds as the source for all of it." "Which means," I prompted, anticipating her next point, "we can add financial infidelity to the divorce filing." "Precisely," she affirmed. "It paints a very clear picture of premeditation and a deliberate scheme to defraud. It makes our case significantly stronger." I thanked her and hung up, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. I wasn't surprised, not truly. The signs had been there, the narrative clear. Yet, the confirmation, the stark, irrefutable evidence of her year-long betrayal, still felt like a sharp, unexpected punch to the gut. Dana hadn't simply left me for someone else in a moment of passion. She had been meticulously planning her exit, systematically funding both her escape and her new boyfriend's failing business with my money, right under my nose for over a year. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth, a profound sense of violation. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You need to back off. Dana deserves better than you. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. Trey Harmon, getting directly involved. Interesting." The influencer was finally stepping out from behind his carefully curated facade. This was exactly what I had expected, a predictable escalation. I drove to my brother's house the next morning, the sun barely cresting the horizon. Jason, with his brilliant mind for digital security and his uncanny ability to navigate the labyrinthine world of online data, was the perfect complement to my financial expertise. We'd collaborated on complex cases before, our skills intertwining seamlessly. But this was different. This was personal, and the stakes were higher than ever. "I need everything you can possibly find on Harmon Fitness LLC." I told him, my voice devoid of emotion as I laid out the situation. "Bank records, loan applications, credit lines, everything. I want the complete financial picture, legal channels only." Jason, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "Legal channels only, of course, Leonard. We're just connecting public dots faster than most people could, right?" He understood the nuance, the delicate dance between what was publicly accessible and what required more direct, legally sanctioned investigation. "Precisely," I affirmed, a grim set to my jaw. 3 intense hours later, hunched over twin glowing monitors, we had our answer. The digital breadcrumbs had led us directly to the cold, hard truth. Trey Harmon wasn't just in debt, he was spectacularly underwater, drowning in a sea of liabilities. His meticulously crafted social media persona painted a vibrant picture of success, of a thriving fitness empire, but the underlying reality was a decaying structure of financial mismanagement. The new state of the art equipment, the ambitious studio expansion, the flashy promotional events, all of it had been funded through a series of increasingly risky, high-interest loans, and, more recently, through Dana's increasingly desperate investments, her pilfered money. But there was something else, a crucial detail, a hidden landmine that Dana, in her blissful ignorance of financial intricacies, couldn't possibly have known about. "Look at this," Jason said, his finger tapping the screen, highlighting a specific document. Harmon applied for a small business loan 4 months ago, using all that fancy gym equipment as collateral. "That's normal," I acknowledged, my eyes scanning the details. "Standard practice for a business loan." "Yeah, but look who co-signed," Jason replied, a subtle, almost imperceptible note of grim satisfaction in his voice. I leaned forward, my gaze sharpening. The document, crisp and official, displayed Dana's signature, bold and unmistakable, on a massive $105,000 equipment loan. She had co-signed it just weeks before she left me, before her dramatic exit. "But here's the kicker," Jason continued, his voice quiet, almost conspiratorial. "The loan explicitly specifies joint responsibility with her spouse. They used your marital status, Leonard, your combined assets, to secure better terms, a lower interest rate, a more favorable payment schedule. Without your knowledge, without your consent, they essentially put your wealth on the hook for his debt." I stared at the screen, the implications washing over me like a cold wave. She hadn't just taken my money. She had leveraged my entire financial standing, my assets, my years of hard work, to bolster his failing enterprise, all without my knowledge or consent. "Exactly," Jason confirmed, as if reading my thoughts. "And there's more. 3 separate business credit cards, a new commercial space rental lease, and that luxury car lease she signed for him, all of them bear Dana's signature. And all of them explicitly leverage your marital assets as security. Your name, your creditworthiness, even if indirectly, was the foundation of their entire house of cards." I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and stared out at the suburban street. Outside, oblivious to the complex, venomous adult complications of the world, children were laughing, their bright, innocent voices carrying faintly on the breeze. They were playing in the yard next door, their lives simple, uncomplicated. "She has no idea what she's done," I said finally, the words a quiet, grim assessment, or neither does he. They had played with fire, assuming their superficial charms and calculated deceptions would be enough to escape the inevitable inferno. The next morning, I met with my attorney. A meticulously prepared folder, brimming with the damning evidence we had unearthed resting on the table between us. "I want to move quickly," I told her, my voice urgent, precise. "Before they realize the extent of what's happening. Before they have a chance to hide or liquidate anything else." She reviewed the documents, her sharp eyes scanning the financial statements, the loan agreements, the damning signatures. Her expression, initially stoic, softened into a grim nod. "This is more than enough, Leonard. We'll file for emergency asset protection today. The loan fraud alone, the forgery of your implied consent, is sufficient grounds to freeze every single shared asset, every investment, every bank account, until the divorce is definitively settled. And given what we have here, Dana is facing much more than just a messy divorce." That afternoon, a quiet resolve settled over me as I drove to Harmon Fitness. The gym, nestled in a newly developed commercial district, was sleek and aggressively modern, a monument to superficiality. Motivational quotes, rendered in bold, sans serif fonts, were painted on the exposed brick walls, their platitudes ringing hollow. Trey's perfectly sculpted face, perpetually smiling, was plastered across the entrance in a larger-than-life promotional poster, a testament to his manufactured image. Inside, a scattering of 20-somethings, clad in exorbitantly priced workout gear, posed for selfies between half-hearted sets, their attention more focused on their phones than their physical exertion. The air hummed with the superficiality of it all. Trey, ever the showman, spotted me immediately. He was taller in person than in his photos, with the artificial tan and unnervingly perfect capped teeth of someone who had meticulously built their entire career on outward appearance, on selling an illusion. He walked over, his hand extended, his smile perfectly calibrated, a carefully constructed mask of confident affability. "You must be Leonard," he began, his voice smooth, practiced. "Dana's mentioned you, so good to finally meet you." "I'm sure she has," I replied, my voice calm, devoid of any warmth. I did not take his offered hand, letting it hang awkwardly in the air between us. "We need to talk, Mr. Harmon." Privately. His smile faltered, a fleeting moment of confusion, crossing his features before he recovered. He gestured towards a glass-walled office at the back of the gym, a space designed for maximum visibility, a fishbowl for all to see, yet surprisingly soundproof. "Of course," he said, leading the way. He closed the door behind us, the sound a faint thud. "What can I do for you, Leonard?" he asked, resuming his carefully maintained composure. I placed the folder I carried onto his sleek, minimalist desk. It was thin, but its contents were devastating. "This," I stated, my voice even, "is every financial document connecting you to Dana. Loans, credit cards, leases, all signed by her, and all of them, explicitly or implicitly, using our marital assets as security." He picked up the folder cautiously, his brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the documents within. Confusion slowly morphed into a dawning comprehension. "I don't understand," he mumbled, though a flicker of fear was already visible in his eyes. "It's simple, Mr. Harmon," I clarified, my voice unwavering. "Dana used our marriage, our combined financial standing, to back your business loans and other agreements. Now we are divorcing. And those guarantees, those financial pledges secured by our shared assets, are effectively invalid, legally null and void." The color drained from his face as he frantically flipped through the pages, the casual confidence of moments before evaporating. "These are all legitimate business arrangements between Dana and me," he protested, his voice rising slightly. "Maybe," I conceded, "but the banks approved them based on our combined assets and income. Assets she no longer has access to, and assets which are now fully frozen by court order, pending divorce proceedings and fraud investigations. Your collateral is now non-existent." He slowly closed the folder, his face a mask of pale shock. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing from you, Mr. Harmon," I replied, my gaze direct and unwavering. "I just thought you should know what's coming. The banks will be calling those loans due very, very soon. You might want to prepare for that." "Dana said you were wealthy?" he said, his voice hardening, a flash of resentment in his eyes. "That money's not an issue for you." "Money's never been the issue, Mr. Harmon," I replied, standing to leave. "Trust was. And that, you both completely destroyed." I walked to the door, my hand on the cool metal of the handle, but paused. "One more thing," I added, turning back to face him. "When Dana moved out, she took some items of significant sentimental value to me. Family photos, my father's watch, things money can't replace. I expect them back." He stared at me for a long moment, the silence thick with unspoken implications. "I'll see what I can do," he said finally, his voice barely audible. I simply nodded and left, leaving him alone with the damning folder and the crushing weight of impending financial ruin. The next day, a courier delivered a nondescript box to my hotel room. Inside, meticulously packed, were the missing photos, my father's cherished watch, and other personal items I had thought lost forever. There was no note, no apology, just the silent acknowledgement of a debt paid. That same afternoon, my attorney confirmed that the emergency asset protection order had been granted. All shared assets, every single one, would remain frozen and inaccessible until the divorce was finalized, every legal loose end tied. I logged into my primary financial management system, the custom-built interface that had proved so invaluable. The alerts section was a flurry of red notifications. Dana had attempted to access our frozen joint accounts a staggering 17 times in the past 24 hours, her desperation palpable. She had also, with a remarkable lack of foresight, tried to open a new credit line using our home, which was also frozen as a marital asset, as collateral. Denied, the system simply stated. My phone lit up with her name again. This time I answered. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice thin and shaking, on the verge of breaking. The bank called in Trey's loans. "Leonard! All of them. They're seizing the equipment tomorrow. He's ruined."
"That's unfortunate, Dana,"
I said calmly, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "But it's the natural consequence of financial fraud and misrepresentation. Not something I've done directly. This is vindictive. Leonard, you're destroying him to get back at me." Her words were laced with a desperate accusation, an attempt to shift blame. "I'm not doing anything to him, Dana," I corrected, my patience wearing thin. "I'm simply protecting myself from fraud. You used our marriage, my assets, to secure his loans without my knowledge or consent. That, as I've explained, is illegal. And now, you're both facing the consequences of those choices. We can work this out, Leonard," she said, her voice softening suddenly, shifting gears into a practiced tone of feigned vulnerability, a last-ditch effort at manipulation. "Come home. We'll talk. We can fix this." 15 years of marriage, and she still thought I could be manipulated that easily, that a soft word and a plea could erase years of calculated deception. "There's nothing to work out, Dana," I replied, my voice firm and unwavering. "The divorce will proceed as planned. The fraud investigation will continue, and Trey will learn an expensive lesson about due diligence and the consequences of reckless financial behavior. Your actions, and his, have set this course. There's no turning back." I ended the call and, with a satisfying finality, blocked her number. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply, peacefully. The invisible ledger of resentments that had weighed me down for so long felt finally, irrevocably balanced. 3 weeks later, I sat in a sterile conference room, the air thick with unspoken tension, as Dana and her newly subdued attorney arrived for our court-ordered mediation. Dana looked tired, visibly strained. The designer outfit and perfectly applied makeup couldn't quite conceal the dark circles beneath her eyes, the drawn pallor of her face. The mask she usually wore had slipped. Her attorney, a man whose aggressive reputation preceded him, spoke first, attempting to project an air of confident negotiation. "My client is willing to be reasonable about the division of assets, despite the aggressive tactics employed thus far by Mr. Kessler's legal team." My attorney, a sharp, astute woman who had navigated countless complex divorces, offered a polite, almost imperceptible smile. "That's good to hear," she replied, her voice calm and measured, "because there's been a significant development." She slid a document, crisp and official, across the polished conference table towards Dana's attorney. "The bank has completed its internal fraud investigation." Dana's attorney picked up the document, his eyes quickly scanning the contents. As he read, his face paled, the color draining from his cheeks with each passing line. "They've determined," my attorney continued, her voice unwavering, "that Ms. Bowman forged Leonard's signature on multiple loan documents, explicitly using their marital assets as collateral without his knowledge or consent." Dana's attorney closed the document slowly, his usual bravado completely deflated. We'll need time to review this," he stammered, his voice weak. "Of course," my attorney said, her smile widening just slightly, a hint of steel beneath the politeness. "But you should know that the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney's office. This meeting, gentlemen, is merely a courtesy before formal criminal charges are officially filed. Dana stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and genuine terror. Criminal charges.
Leonard, you can't be serious!
You wouldn't. I met her gaze steadily, my face expressionless. I didn't file the charges, Dana. I stated calmly, the bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud. It's a crime, not just a misunderstanding. Her attorney leaned in, whispering something urgently in her ear. She shook her head vehemently, her eyes still fixed on me, a desperate plea in their depths. However, my attorney continued, cutting through the silence. If Ms. Bowman is willing to sign our proposed settlement agreement today, without further argument or delay, Leonard is prepared to provide a statement to the bank that could potentially mitigate the criminal implications. He will not, for instance, press charges for the theft of his personal property or the unauthorized transfer from the joint account. This is her opportunity to avoid a much graver situation. I watched as Dana's carefully constructed world, her entire edifice of privilege and deceit, collapsed around her. She had expected anger, perhaps jealousy, even a pathetic plea for reconciliation. She had not clearly expected consequences. Real, tangible, life-altering consequences. The settlement is generous, Dana, I said quietly, my voice a calm counterpoint to the storm raging in her eyes. You keep your yoga studio, which, to your credit, was always profitable. You keep your car and your personal belongings. You receive no alimony whatsoever, as the terms of the fraud preclude it, and you assume full responsibility for all the debts you incurred in my name, effectively leveraging my assets without my knowledge. And Trey? She asked, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper of desperation. Mr. Harmon's financial issues are his own problem, Ms. Bowman. My attorney replied, her voice firm. But without your husband's substantial assets backing those loans, I understand the bank has already begun repossession proceedings for all his equipment and assets. His business, I'm afraid, is effectively defunct. Dana signed the papers without another word, her hand trembling slightly as she affixed her signature to the dissolution of our marriage and the dismantling of her carefully constructed deception. As we left the conference room, she reached out, catching my arm, her touch hesitant, almost foreign. I never thought you'd fight back like this, Leonard, she said, her voice hollow, devoid of its usual vibrancy. You always just went along with everything. That was my choice then, Dana, I replied, meeting her gaze. Just like this, all of this was your choice. I walked away without looking back, the chapter of our lives irrevocably closed. A month later, I moved out of the hotel and into a small, unassuming house near downtown Des Moines. It wasn't fancy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a charming craftsman-style home with good bones that needed some work, some attention, a project. The kind of hands, an endeavor that would keep my mind occupied, and my hands busy during the long evenings. It was a blank canvas, a new beginning. I heard through mutual friends that Dana had, predictably, moved to Colorado, hoping to start over. Her Instagram feed, still active and curated, showcased breathtaking mountain views and an endless stream of inspirational quotes about new beginnings, healing, and self-discovery, all carefully devoid of any mention of the wreckage she had left behind. Trey's gym, I learned, had been sold to a national chain for a fraction of its perceived value, and he had, equally predictably, relocated to Miami to attempt to expand his brand, there undoubtedly seeking new, unsuspecting investors. Neither of them, of course, ever publicly mentioned what had truly happened. People rarely advertise their failures. My brother Jason stopped by one Saturday, the first truly warm day of spring, to help me install new cabinets in the kitchen. The scent of fresh wood and sawdust filled the air, a pleasant contrast to the stale aroma of legal documents. Heard anything from Dana? He asked, as we meticulously measured for the hinges, his voice casual. No, I said, my answer definitive, and I don't expect to. She's a ghost now, Jason continued, his eyes meeting mine over the tape measure. You could have taken her for everything. The fraud charges alone would have ensured that. You had her dead to rights. I shrugged, a subtle movement of my shoulders. What would be the point, Jason? What would it achieve? She's no longer my problem. Her failures, her choices, are hers alone to bear. I'm free of them. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sounds of measuring, cutting, and mounting creating a meditative state, a sense of quiet accomplishment. I'm thinking of taking some time off, I said eventually, breaking the silence, my voice thoughtful. Maybe drive up to Minnesota, do some fishing at the cabin, clear my head. Dad would like that, Jason replied, a fond smile playing on his lips. You haven't been there since he passed. That evening, after Jason had left, the house settling into a comfortable quiet, I sat on my back porch, a single glass of bourbon in my hand. The neighborhood was tranquil, the silence broken only by the occasional distant dog bark or the faint, happy laughter of a child from down the street. It was starkly different from the upscale, manicured community Dana had insisted on, the one she had always aspired to. This felt more real, more grounded, somehow. I thought about the last 15 years, a long, winding road of unacknowledged compromises and silent observations. I reflected on how I had allowed someone else to define my life, to dictate my worth, to set the parameters of my happiness. I thought about how I had noticed the signs, clear as day, yet chosen, for reasons that now seemed both naive and painfully obvious, to ignore them. And then I considered how, when the inevitable moment finally arrived, when the carefully constructed facade crumbled, I had been prepared. Because some deep, intuitive part of me had always known this day would arrive, had always anticipated the inevitable reckoning. I didn't feel victorious, not truly. I didn't feel vindicated in a triumphant way. I simply felt free. A profound, quiet sense of liberation washed over me, a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing until it settled upon my shoulders. The burden was gone. The next morning, I called my office and, with a sense of purpose and anticipation, told them I'd be taking 2 weeks off. Then, with the rising sun illuminating my new, uncluttered kitchen, I packed my truck, locked up the modest house, and headed north. No itinerary, no expectations, no destination beyond the open road and the promise of quiet solitude. And for the first time in years, there was no invisible ledger of resentments to balance, no emotional debts to calculate. Only the road ahead, stretching toward a future I would finally, truly, define for myself.